As I mentioned, the scanner records a tremendous amount of detail given the proper settings. If I set it at high resolution, much more in many cases that I can see with my unaided eye, and I was fascinated by being able to record that much information. The quality of the scanner light is very beautiful. As you saw when I showed you the scan earlier, the light travels the length of the bed, it wraps around the subject. It's different than if I were photographing outside using the sun or setting up a light in my studio where it's more directional. So it just appealed to me. And also the very rapid fall off of focus from areas in very sharp focus to way out of focus seemed to be an intriguing new way to work. A scanner may have specifications such as 3200 by 6400 hardware resolution. The first number, the 3200, always refers to the maximum number of pixels that it can record on this dimension. The 6400 refers to the motion of the stepper motor that will move along the length of the bed and moves the whole assembly, the CD array, and the light. So there's a lot you can do in terms of the amount of information you want to record with your scanner, depending on how you specify in your software. And it's very important, the software, you might have to dig around a little bit to get this information, but there is the highest optical resolution for your scanner, and then interpolated resolution. Sometimes it's easy, such as my scanner, the Epson 3200. 3200 is the highest optical resolution. That means that's the most information that the hardware, the scanner hardware, can capture. Let me show you, this is a little fuzzy, but this is the scanner software. And you can see I'm set up here at 300 ppi for my scan. Let me show you a little closer. There's my 300. I go all the way down here, 3200, my highest optical resolution. But wait, I can make it much bigger if I want to. These resolutions are interpolated resolution. That is something the software is doing, not the hardware. And it's making up information. And I think that you should never, on your master scan, exceed that optical resolution that's capturing the true information. If you decide at a later date that you need to make a huge, huge, huge image, you can upsample, make it larger in Photoshop, or there are third-party softwares you can use, and they'll do a good job. But don't do it to your master file. Do it on a duplicate. There are lots of ways with working with a scanner and lots of different subject matters, different than what I work with. One website that lists a lot of them is scanography.org. And this website has grown a lot in the last 3 or 4 years, and you will see really a variety of work. I'm going to show you 2 scanning methods that I've used. And when I began scanning, I would more often group several objects together on a scanner and create a reasonably complete image just in that scan. And I'd start, as I've done here, by placing one little coil of paper on the scanner bed and looking at it in my preview. And then I'd add another one and look at it in my preview again. And another one, and I jumped right to the final scan on my monitor. Now, I've changed the way I work a little bit, and more often I will record just single objects on a scan because I want more flexibility of combinations later on. And this shows a seed pod on my scanner bed. And that's the finished scan, just waiting to become part of something else. and it becomes part of a finished image. This leads me to the second part of my process, photo-collage. This distinguishes my work from many other scanographers, and I think for me it's where the real creative work happens. I call the scans I make the building blocks of my work. They're the starting point. And I want to borrow from Ansel Adams' famous quote, "The negative is comparable to the composer's score and the print to its performance." I would say that the scans are the notes or phrases that I combine to make a new composition. Before I show you how I make my photo collages, I'd like to give you some background that will help you understand how I got to the point of working with that process. Briefly, the idea that interested me many years ago, I wanted to combine my dual passions of photography and gardening. Amazing, I went many, many years and never took my camera into my garden. But finally I thought I should try it, and so that's what I did. My garden is a really important thing in my life. It's very restorative. And I also think it's a creative space that parallels art making in a lot of ways. So I trooped out into my garden with my camera, and I started making photographs such as these of the plants and of the planting schemes. And I felt that they were fine as documents of my garden, but I realized that wasn't exactly what I wanted to say. I wanted to speak more to the experience. And to me, gardening is a multi-sensory, multifaceted experience, and that's what moves me about it. It's being in the moment, it's attention to what's right in front of me and what's far away, seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling at the same time. To me, it was a layered experience, a collage. And a collage is a work of formal art, primarily in the visual arts, made from an assemblage of different forms, thus creating a new whole. So I started a number of years of experimenting with different methods of combining images, mainly analog, film, paper. Well, and I'm going to show you a few and just explain the process briefly. I started out with photograms, our old friends, but I added to them, and the areas that traditionally would be blank in a photogram, I printed some information into. These were black and white. I hand-colored them with pencils. Then I rephotographed them with actual objects laid on them. Then I even made borders for my mats that had corresponding imagery. And this was my first thinking about how I'm going to express layers and express the garden experience without a literal, this is my tulip. I worked with handmade paper for a while. I thought that I wanted to work with something more tactile, more organic than slick photo paper that might be a better combination with my imagery. So I learned how to make handmade paper, an adventure in itself. And then I worked with liquid light emulsion, which is a black and white emulsion that you can paint on with a paintbrush or a foam brush onto the paper. So these outer areas are the liquid light emulsion, and it's really fun to work with. And then you expose it and process it normally as you would traditional photographic paper. Then I hand-colored it, and then I did Polaroid transfers, and then matte decoration. I've always been interested in the juxtaposition of inside and outside and how we see our worlds, whether it's through a window or through a camera viewfinder in ways that are kind of analogous. So I did a series where I photographed windows and printed them, cut out the entire window, matted it on the front of my mat board, and then did a second photograph of a garden scene, hand-colored again, this is my theme, hand-coloring, and mounted it on the backboard and blocked them away from each other a little bit so there was some actual depth. And then I came upon some real windows. A neighbor of mine was cleaning his garage and he came across these old inserts from wooden storm doors, and he asked me if I wanted them. And I wonder if anyone else has this experience. When people have junk they don't know what they want to do with, they always ask artists if they want the stuff. And usually we do. And I said, yes, these look pretty interesting. This is a new way to look at layers. I have all these different openings I can use. So I planned out what imagery I wanted where, and hand-colored black and white prints and decorated the windows to go with them. And then I started working in the digital realm, working with Photoshop and making collages, but working with prints that I had already made, and started experimenting. And then in 1998, things changed, and I put together my process of scanning and photo collage, and felt like I had come to my fullest realization of this layered, non-literal, evocative feeling that I wanted with these garden images. And this body of work became Florilegium. This is the first image, and I'll show you just a few. Photo collage has a long history through photography. I'd like to show you a few examples of work made by photographers using both analog and digital methods. This one by Henry Peach Robinson was made in 1858, so really early on in photography, and he combined a great number of negatives to make this print. Lola Alvarez Bravo made this image called The Dream of the Poor. She was a contemporary and colleague of Edward Weston and Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. Arnold Newman we know for his portraiture. He took portraiture in a little different direction with a series of collages. John Paul Caponegro. Robert and Shana Park Harrison. Maggie Taylor. Maggie Taylor mainly works with found photographs, lots of things she finds in flea markets, I believe. And then Jerry Uelsman, who, to my mind, when I think of photo collage, is the first person who comes to my mind in his impeccable darkroom work. I understand he now is working with Photoshop some, but most of what we've seen of his work is done in the darkroom. I work with Photoshop software. I started version 2.5, as you can see down here. And this is so old, I noticed it's for a Windows machine, and I don't even remember having had that computer, but I must have. I'm now working with the current version, CS5, and the difference is amazing over the life of Photoshop. And the greatest advancement, in my opinion, has been the addition of the functions of layers and layer masks. Back in 2.5, there was no such thing. And layers and layer masks have been part of Photoshop for a number of the recent incarnations. And these tools and a good understanding of them are what makes my current work possible.